Discover 3 spine-chilling caving experiences exposed, sinister secrets that will haunt you forever. The Johnson family stood at the mouth of the cave, its dark entrance gaping like the maw of some ancient beast. Each one of them felt the thrill of adventure, but underneath lurked an icy dread. Indiana's countryside had been kind to them once, teeming with laughter and warm regards. Now, with their bills overdue and the town around them crumbling, they stood on the edge of fear and uncertainty. As they stepped inside, a damp chill crept into their bones, wrapping them in a thick cloak of unease. The air felt heavy, and whispers of forgotten lives echoed off the walls. They flicked on their headlamps, illuminating strange markings possibly left by miners long gone. The walls seemed to hum with memories, and with every step forward, the excitement morphed into tension. Their doubts flickered alongside the beams of light. They were not just here for adventure but to reconnect, stripped of smartphones and distractions, trying desperately to find their way back to each other amidst the fading echoes of their lives. Steve, a local guide, joined them. A familiar face, but today, his bright smile felt peculiar. His enthusiasm was almost mechanical. "You guys are gonna love it. The stories I have about this place, I'm telling you, they'll chill you to the bone." They laughed nervously, but as he rambled on, a strange weight hung in the air. His eyes lingered too long on the children, and their skin prickled with discomfort. As they moved deeper, the cave opened into the remnants of a forgotten mining town. Decaying houses yawned open like dead mouths, revealing rusted tools and faded photographs catching their breath in a moment of despair. The flickering shadows transformed into specters, haunting imprints of lives once full and vibrant, now lost in silence. The atmosphere thickened with tension, and arguments from the surface. Their financial troubles, their nagging worries echoed in their minds like dissonant notes in a frightening symphony. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As dusk fell, a new fear gripped them. The air seemed to change, shadows danced just out of reach. The echoes of their laughter faded, replaced by chilling whispers that clawed at their sanity. The darkness felt oppressive, a living entity that wrapped around them, squeezing their hearts. Something stirred in the depths, unseen and malevolent. The soothing facade of familiarity wore thin as Steve's voice echoed ominously against the damp cave walls. "You know, some say that the lives lost here, they don't really leave the cave." Was it a tale or a warning? Anxiety shook them as they glanced behind. The shadows had shifted, and something darker lurked nearby, close enough to touch. Panic clawed at the edges of their minds as they stumbled through the crumbling ruins, racing hearts thumping against their chests. They must escape, but the cave twisted around them, a theater of horrors. Memories of missed connections and unspoken truths surfaced, turning their family bonds into fragile threads. They needed to hold on. They needed to survive. But was their own community hiding a sinister secret beneath the surface? As the dark loomed closer, one question echoed in their hearts: would they emerge as one, or become just another whisper lost to the cavern's cruel embrace? The Johnsons huddled together, their breaths shallow, as the cave's oppressive silence pressed down like a lead weight. The path ahead lay shrouded in darkness, the faint whispers of history beckoning them deeper. Desperation etched into their faces, they turned back toward Steve. But he had drifted further into the shadows, his silhouette swallowed whole by the cave. "Steve! Wait!" Sarah called, fear threading through her voice. The echo returned, cruel and mocking, sending shivers racing down her spine. "Don't worry, he's just ahead, right?" Mark said, but his own voice shook. The walls seemed to pulse, alive with something ancient and restless. A flicker of movement caught her eye. She swung the beam of her headlamp, illuminating twisted roots and uneven rock, but no sign of Steve. Maybe we should go back, Clara whispered, clutching her brother's arm tightly. Panic simmered beneath their skin, heat creeping in like a fire consuming dry wood. Nah, let us just give him a minute, Mark replied, but uncertainty gnawed at him. He took a step back, the faintest inkling of fear creeping in, spiking his adrenaline in stark contrast to the chill of the cave. Suddenly, a loud clattering echoed through the air, like chains being thrown against the stone. Did you hear that? Clara gasped, eyes wide with horror. Maybe it's just some old equipment, Mark began, but even he sensed the impossibility in his words. The darkness closed in tighter, wrapping around them like an impending storm. Steve! The urgency in Sarah's voice sent a pulse of dread through them. They took cautious steps forward, shoulders brushing against the cold, damp walls. The atmosphere thickened, turning suffocating as unseen forces began to weigh them down. It's just a cave, Sarah whispered to herself, trying to drown out the growing whispers that clawed at her mind. As they pushed on, their lights flickered, illuminating something in the distance, a vague shape darting between the ruins. Did you see that? Clara yelled, eyes wide. The breath caught in their throats. It's probably just a trick of the light, Mark protested, yet the tremor in his voice betrayed him. They inched forward, guided by a blend of fear and curiosity that had grown insatiable. Then they spotted Steve, standing at the edge of a yawning chasm, back turned, seemingly entranced. The air around him flickered with shadows, twisting and curling in unnatural ways. What are you doing? Sarah shouted, but he didn't budge. When he did turn, his smile was now a ghastly grimace, his eyes darkened to voids. You have to see this. They're waiting, he hissed, voice almost unrecognizable, a curling whisper enveloped in malice. What do you mean? Mark stammered. A chill serpent coiled around his spine as he took a hesitant step back. Let us go. Sarah yelled, pulling Clara back, but the ground trembled. The walls reverberated with an unholy thrum that vibrated through their bones. Mesmerized, Steve pointed downward into the chasm, as ghastly murmurs spilled forth like blood on the stone. Can't you hear them? His voice cracked, melding with the cries, pleading, suffocating. They just want to be found. In that moment, a shadow leapt from the darkness, an indistinct shape stretching its limbs wide and arching towards them. Time froze. Fear filtered through the air like a noxious mist. Run! Clara screamed, only half aware of her own voice as she pulled her brother, but nothing was certain anymore. The cave had changed. It felt alive, and they were its prey. At the precipice of their escape, the whispers crescendoed above their terrified breaths, chanting an echo that would haunt them forever. But would they reach the exit before darkness took them whole? What secrets lay in wait behind the shadows, yearning to ensnare their souls? They bolted, adrenaline coursing through their veins as they fled the chasm's edge. The screams of Clara and Sarah echoed in their minds, drowning out the sinister whispers that still slithered through the cave. Mark's heart raced, pounding like a war drum as he grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her away from Steve, away from the danger that lurked in his eyes. Keep moving! He shouted, darkness swallowing his words almost immediately. Now, the whispers morphed into a cacophony, words twisted and torn like tattered flags in a storm. Are they following us? Clara's voice trembled, glancing back toward the chasm. Don't look! Mark commanded, fear thickening in his throat. Just run. They stumbled deeper into the cave, sharp rocks biting into their shoes as the beam from Sarah's headlamp illuminated grotesque formations jutting from the walls. Shadows danced around them, looming threats that clawed at their resolve. But then they were met with a crossroads, a vast chamber where the cave split in three, each path dark and foreboding. The weight of the decision pressed heavily on him. Which way? He panted. Let us split up, Sarah suggested, her voice quiet but insistent. We'll cover more ground. They can't trap us all. Are you insane? Mark shot back, panic edging into his voice. We need to stick together. We have to. Clara cried, eyes wide and pleading. We can't risk losing each other in here, not again. Fine. But we keep in contact. Let us shout if we see anything. Mark relented, though every hair on his body prickled at the thought. Clara took a left, Sarah headed straight, and Mark reluctantly chose the right path. As he moved, the shadows began to close in, wrapping around him like fingers, chilling him to the core. His headlamp flickered, casting untrustworthy light on the cave walls, which seemed to twist and distort around him. He could hear the echo of a slow dripping sound, like a heartbeat, becoming louder. Mark! Clara's voice called from the left corridor, strained and filled with the weight of dread. He wanted to run back to her but pushed forward instead, courage a fragile thread amidst a storm. Clara! Stay close! He yelled in return, his own voice trembling in the tension. But there was no answer. A sense of dread took root in his stomach, a gnawing realization sinking in. Something was wrong. Then the whispers grew louder. No, not whispers. It was a growl now, rumbling low and guttural, rising from the darkness, slithering through the cracks of the cave. Suddenly, a figure materialized in the shadows ahead, emerging like a long-buried memory. Mark stumbled backward, heart racing, ready to run, but as the figure stepped into the light, his breath caught. It was Steve, but not the Steve he knew. He stood there, an eerie smile plastered on his face, skin pale and streaked with dark shadows, eyes wide and unseeing, as if he was both there and yet somewhere far away. You shouldn't have left me, he said, a voice that echoed like a split bell, cold and hollow. Where's Clara? Where's Sarah? Mark's voice trembled, the walls of the cave compressing around him. They're part of it now. You can't escape, Steve hissed. Mark's pulse thundered in his ears, the cave closing in around him. The ground shook, the ancient rock groaning as if awakening. The darkness radiated from Steve, swallowing the light, and the whispers crescendoed to a terrifying roar. Mark turned to run back, but the cave had shifted. His path disappeared into nothingness. The frantic heaviness of helplessness clawed at him as he spun around. Help! He screamed, desperation flooding through him. All at once, the shadows surged forward, stretching out like hungry hands, and laughter echoed in the abyss of the cave. What would he sacrifice to uncover the truth behind Steve's transformation? Would it cost him his very soul? Mark stumbled back, instinctually wanting to shield himself from the dark, consuming force that felt awfully close. The laughter echoed off the cave walls, distorting into a nightmare symphony. Steve! He called, voice sharp with panic. What the hell happened to you? Suddenly, the temperature dropped, a sharp chill that cut through his sweat-soaked shirt. He turned as shadows twisted around the corners, creeping ever closer. The growl seemed to reverberate from every direction now, alive and unrelenting. He pushed past the figure of Steve, trying to breathe against the rising tide of fear. It felt like running through water, each step pulling him down deeper into the abyss. Clara! Sarah! He shouted again, conviction eroding with every second that passed. Deep inside, a nagging thought clawed at him: were they really still alive? With every ragged breath, he found reason to doubt, to fear. The cave walls loomed like the towering jaws of some monstrous beast. He pressed on, desperate to find a way out, but each crevice he passed seemed to whisper secrets he didn't want to hear. Then, a faint glimmer of light emerged ahead. Hope sparked within him. With every ounce of energy, he lunged toward it, his heart racing. The beam of his headlamp flickered violently, mirroring the chaos swelling inside his chest. As he neared the light, the source revealed itself. It wasn't just light, but another chamber. The walls were lined with ancient etchings, pulsating with a strange luminescence. They twisted and turned, forming grotesque faces that seemed to watch him, grotesque souls trapped within the stone. He stepped forward, heart pounding, scanning the strange symbols. A chilling realization settled in. These weren't just decorations, they were scenes, depicting figures similar to Clara and Sarah. It looked like a ritual, a grisly gallery of offerings. His hands trembled as he traced a finger over the designs, the whispers intensifying louder, more frenzied. Then he saw a figure in the corner of the etching, unmistakably Steve. The face twisted in a macabre expression, eyes wide, mouth agape. "It shows them taking," he breathed, dread pooling in the pit of his stomach. "Mark, help me." Clara's voice cut through the air suddenly, clear and desperate. It came from deeper within the cave, through an opening he hadn't noticed. The sound was a lifeline, yanking him back. "Clara!" he shouted, pushing deeper into that part of the cave, the glimmering faces turning to follow him, eyes narrowing with sinister intent. The laughter roared back in response, drowning her cries. He ran, heart pounding violently against his ribs. "Clara, I'm coming!" he yelled, but the shadows thickened, reaching for him, clawing at the edges of his sanity. Suddenly, each stone footfall caused the ground to shake, the cave groaning beneath him as if it were waking from slumber. Another echo. Sarah's scream, cut short. A wave of icy fear crashed over him. They were trapped and the cave knew it. It wanted them, all of them. He rounded a bend, mind racing, breath hitching in his throat. Clara's voice came clearer, but now it was tinged with terror, a chilling melody that painted vivid pictures in his mind. What was happening to her? "Mark, please." "I can't hold on." His heart plummeted. He had to reach her, but the darkness closed in. He could see change, could feel it, like the cave was alive, hungry for sacrifice. "Clara!" He cried out again, nearing the opening, but there was something in the shadows. Something wrong. It stood there, in the entrance, backlit by the faint glow, an unfamiliar silhouette, merging with the darkness. And behind it, Steve's sinister laughter slithered through the air. "Come to her, Mark," it taunted. "It's only the beginning." The realization crashed over him like ice water. What if this wasn't a cave at all? What if it was alive, and what laid within it was far worse than he ever imagined? He froze, stuck with dread. Could he still save Clara? But the shadows were creeping closer, a consuming force whispering his name. "Mark! Come back!" Clara's voice shattered the moment. He had to decide now: risk everything for her or flee into the darkness. Would he confront the horror waiting before him, or would he flee into the unknown? Panic surged through Mark as he stood frozen, uncertainty suffocating him. The silhouette was taller than any of them. Its figure twisted unnaturally, and he could feel an unsettling presence radiating from it, a heavy weight pushing him back into the abyss. "Clara!" he shouted again, his voice cracking as the laughter echoed again. "I'm coming." With determination clawing at him, he took a step forward. The shadow shifted, a response to his movement. The darkness around him seemed to pulse, thickening with each beat of his heart, pressing against him like a vice. He forced himself to breathe, heart racing like a caged animal. What do you want?" he challenged, his voice small but resolute. The figure remained silent, but the air crackled with malevolence, wrapping around him like a noose. Behind it, Steve's eyes glinted, dark pools in the dim light. "Only what you owe," Steve said, his voice suddenly piercing, cold and devoid of humanity. "The price must be paid." A wave of nausea washed over Mark. He thought of Clara, of Sarah. What price? He couldn't abandon his friends. Swallowing hard, he forced his legs to move, each step an agonizing battle against the creeping dread. "Mark, please." Clara pleaded again, her voice tense with impending doom, echoing through the shadows. "Help me. It's coming." He lurched forward, the shadows whipping around him, shrieking, angry at his defiance. The tendrils of darkness began to coil around his ankles like serpents, drawing him back. He fought against them, kicking at the air, desperate to keep moving. The shadows writhed, mimicking ancient creatures, faces emerging from the stone walls, their eyes full of pain and hunger. It felt as if he were stepping into a cursed mosaic of agony, time-worn and alive, each whimper a silent scream entangled in the darkness. "I want to let you take her," Mark shouted, channeling all his fear into strength. He surged forward, bursting through the threshold and into the chamber beyond. In an instant, the shadows recoiled, hissing, retreating as light cascaded around him. But it wasn't his safety, it was an altar, a horrific spectacle of offerings that lay scattered across the stone slab, remnants of those who had come before. Mark's breath caught in his throat. Clara! The sickening realization enveloped him. His hands shook, revolting against the sight before him. Was this where they would end? The walls creaked, echoing a chorus of lost souls. "Mark," Clara's voice rang again, now a terrifying whisper, "you must choose." He turned to the altar, and something caught his eye, an engraving that matched the etchings from before, images of hilltops, of towns consumed by shadows and sacrifice. They were gathering souls. No! Mark gasped, horrified realization consuming him as he understood the ritual's purpose, but before he could process further, the floor shuddered, sending tremors through the air. The altar splintered underfoot, its surface cracking like dry pavement. Mark stumbled, panic clawing for his throat as the dark entity's gaze pinned him. "Come," Steve hissed, a grin stretching across his face that was utterly wrong. "Join us. Become part of the offering." Mark's heart raced. Clara was still out there, and the shadows grew thicker, more suffocating. He had to decide, understand the dark secret of this place and rescue Clara, or succumb to the entity's call. With one last breath, he prepared to confront the consuming force waiting inside the shadows. Could he defy it? Or was his fate sealed? "Mark!" Clara's voice cut through again, desperate, but something deeper echoed behind her, chilling him to his core. He had to act now. But what would be waiting on the other side of courage? The crack in the altar yawned wider, the shadows churning with a formidable life of their own. Mark's breath came in ragged bursts, adrenaline crashing through him in waves. He clenched his fists, feeling his nails dig into his palms, grounding him for one last stand. "Choose." The voice vibrated through the air, sharp and echoing. An agonized scream accompanied it, a soul reaching out, desperate, lost. Mark's heart plummeted. The choice loomed heavy. Was it Clara he could save, or would he fall prey to the darkness? "Mark, please." The urgency in Clara's voice twisted in his gut. He stumbled forward, glancing back at the altar, its grotesque offering seeming to wriggle as if alive. Tiny, desperate faces formed within the stone, their mouths gasping soundless cries for help. No. Not now. Mark shook his head, focusing on the glitter of Clara's eyes in the distance. He couldn't leave her. He had to save her. Dark tendrils beckoned, swirling around his body like smoke, whispering promises of power and security, feeding off his doubt. "Join us." The creature's voice slithered through the air, smooth and intoxicating. For a moment, Mark found himself entranced, the shadows promising freedom from pain, a way to transcend the mortal realm. But Clara's voice broke through, pure and unyielding, "Mark." Each cry sliced through him like glass, shredding the dark enchantment. His own voice trembled, "I will not go with you. I will not pay your price." A surge of defiance surged within him, fueling his resolve. The shadows recoiled, a cacophony of wails filling the chamber, as the entity's hunger swelled into a furious roar. It lashed out, the ground beneath Mark rumbling violently, sending shudders creeping through his bones. "No!" he bellowed, tearing his eyes from the gruesome altar. With all his might, he moved toward the murky edge of the darkness where Clara stood, a beacon through the despair. Her figure flickered, wavering like a flame in the wind. Mark reached for her, eyes wide, desperation clawing at his heart. The shadows whipped around him with a deafening hiss, backlash surging like a tidal wave, trying to drag him back into the abyss. Together. Clara's voice surged through the swirls of darkness, and for the briefest moment, he could see her a shimmering figure fighting against the very barriers set between them. "Hold on!" he shouted, plunging forward despite the weight of the shadows wrapping around him. A cold sweat dripped down his neck, and panic surged within him, but he couldn't falter now. The shadows shrieked, a haunting symphony of agony and rage as he lunged, feeling Clara's warmth just within reach. Their fingers barely brushed, sent butterflies of hope darting through him. Then, the floor shattered, a violent explosion of stone and despair erupted beneath Mark, and he felt himself falling, slipping deeper into chaos. The darkness writhed, reaching out like 1,000 hungry hands. "Mark!" Clara's voice echoed, now distant, a fading sparkle amidst the encroaching night. Desperation clawed at Mark's throat as the abyss closed in. Suddenly, a blinding light erupted, blaring his senses, illuminating the chamber, and for an instant, time froze. Mark squinted against the brilliance, heart pounding, unsure if it was salvation or a final illusion, and then he felt a pulse of energy, overwhelming, resonating in his very core. It wasn't darkness, it was life, freedom, something that promised to break the curse, but was it truly a gift, or another twisted deception? As the light consumed the shadows, Mark screamed, body tensing, teetering on the edge of understanding the truth. "What have I awakened?" Somewhere deep within the chaos, Clara's cry echoed again, a haunting plea caught between realms. Mark had to decide. Yet now, he was blind to the price of his choice. Mark felt the warmth of the light envelop him, a smothering blanket that pressed tightly against his skin. It was alive, crackling with energy, and everywhere he turned, it sparkled with a chaotic brilliance. But still, he sensed Clara, her presence like a haunting melody that echoed through the chaos. "Clara!" he shouted, voice strained, desperation wrapping like a vice around his throat. The light pulsed again, brighter this time, and he realized it was a doorway, an aperture into something else. Was this hope? Or the trap of the shadows masquerading as salvation? As the light poured down, the dark tendrils retreated, hissing with anger, coiling back like snakes wounded by sunlight. But the moment was fragile, and Mark knew it wouldn't last. There had to be an escape. He stepped forward, but the ground trembled beneath him, splintering with the sound of cracking bone. The altar waged a final war, howling with fury, unleashing shadows that darted like wild animals across the stone floor. They tugged at him, clinging to his ankles, trying to pull him back into that abyss where Clara's faint voice faded, replaced by a chorus of anguished wails. "Hold on!" Mark shouted again, for both himself and Clara. His feet fought against the grip of the shadows. The altar rumbled ominously, dark energies twisting and turning, demanding their debt. He looked around, searching for something, anything that could help him unite with her. In the chaos, a memory flickered through his mind, a time when they had explored the abandoned caves at the edge of town. They had found a hidden chamber with veins of bright, shimmering quartz. "Follow the light," Clara had said. "Clara!" He began to charge toward the blazing brightness at the center, recalling her laugh, her warmth, the life they had promised one another, but as he ran, the darkness surged back with a vengeance. It clawed at his skin, razor sharp. He could feel the despair crawling inside his chest, chilling his heart. "No!" he gasped, forcing himself to push through. He reached the edge of the light, where the shadows battled against it, screaming in rage. With one last surging breath, he leaped into the glow, his heart stuttering, an anticipation riveted through him. Then it happened. The moment he crossed from darkness into light, a violent tremor rolled through his body. The energy shifted, consuming him whole. Whispers filled the air, 100 voices clamoring for attention, words slurred in an ethereal echo. He could see Clara's silhouette, desperate, stretching her arms towards him, but the darkness didn't release its grip without consequence. Suddenly, he was spun around, thrown by an unseen force back into the shadows. Mark felt the despair take hold, as if the weight of countless souls descended on him, pinning him against the ground. He was nowhere and everywhere, lost within an unnatural chasm that twisted time and space. "Mark!" Clara's voice shattered the cacophony, clear and piercing. She was still there, fighting. With a violent push, he forced his mind to break free, to defy the doom closing around him. "I will not leave you," he screamed, determination igniting a flame in his chest. Mark could almost feel the light reaching through the cracks in the darkness. He had to shatter it entirely. Then, from somewhere deep inside, a thought surged, a realization. "Clara can't be gone," he gasped, feeling the light pulse stronger. "We're intertwined. I can fight for both of us." The thought gave him strength. He focused on Clara, recalling memories of warmth and joy amidst the cold despair. The pain surged and flared around him, but he latched onto that flickering light, shouting out into the void. "Together. Always together." In that desperate moment, the shadows recoiled. The whispers dulled to a whimper, and he felt the surge of power thrust him toward the light, a bond solidifying like iron. But was it too late? The shadows howled, shrieking against the intrusion. Once more, darkness surged. But this time, there was no question. Mark leapt forward, heart racing, as all around him the world blurred into chaos, and then the light pulsed and went out. What had happened? Mark found himself with a frigid panic wrapping around him, but Clara's voice lingered still, beckoning him from beyond the darkness. As the silence enveloped him, he could almost taste the dread. What awaited him in the pitch-black abyss now? He felt a breath at his neck and spun around. Was it Clara? Or had he awakened something far worse? Mark's heart thundered in his chest, a primal drum signaling the standoff between him and whatever lay concealed in the shadows. The air grew thick, a damp miasma clinging to his skin like a shroud. Was that a whisper? He strained to catch the words, but they twisted around him like smoke, vanishing into the void. "Is anyone there?" he croaked, voice trembling. Silence answered him, heavy and suffocating, that silence being its own horror. Panic clawed through his veins. In the darkness, he could feel the weight of unseen eyes. He took a step back, then another, until he felt the rough stone of the altar pressing against his shoulders. The darkness shifted again, undulating with a life of its own, stirring memories he could hardly stand to recall. "Everything okay, Clara?" he mumbled, though knowing the answer. That laugh, that innocent melody, it echoed still, but it was too distant, like a song played on a rusty record. Without warning, a sound erupted around him, a guttural roar that shattered the constricting silence. It wasn't just the echoes of disappointment anymore, it was something else. Something hungry. The shadows pulsed, swirling deeper, a whirlpool of malice drawing closer. Mark abruptly whirled, the panic rising within him. "Get away from me!" he shouted. But the shadows beckoned him, whispering promises laced with despair, offering clarity and resolution at the cost of his soul. He strained to breathe, collapsing to his knees while his skin prickled, electric with dread. "Clara! I'm coming!" he shouted again, forcing the words past the suffocating gloom. In the relentless dark, he fumbled for something solid, his fingers brushing over the stones beneath him. They were still warm, remnants of the chaos that had unfolded only moments ago. With sudden clarity, he understood his memories were tethering him, keeping him anchored to what was left of Clara. Together. Always together, he whispered to himself. That mantra rose like a lifeboat in an ocean of despair. Gripping the surface of the altar, he forced himself to stand, feeling the power of their bond sparking within him. He could almost feel her warmth, the softness of her palm in his, urging him on like a lighthouse in the storm. The darkness let out another screeching wail, as if it were affected by his declaration, recoiling from the pulse of that connection. Then, a blinding flash punctured the dark. Mark squinted, shielding his eyes as the light returned, crashing over him in waves. It illuminated a new space, scrawled symbols on the walls flickering with vibrant colors, winding around like tendrils of smoke. "Clara!" he bellowed, pushing the light aside as he advanced, eyes scanning the expanse. He felt air rush around him, and when he looked over his shoulder, the darkness was shrinking, quivering like a wounded beast, but it wasn't just Mark and Clara that the light sought to draw together. Slender figures began to take shape in the radiance. Twisted, grotesque silhouettes formed from the dark power that surrounded him. They smiled, though their eyes were voids, oblivious to the war raging within Mark. "Join us," they hissed, their voices a chorus of haunting whispers. Warmth turned to ice in his veins as he realized they were once like him, lost souls, trapped, clamoring for escape, welcoming him into their void. With dread pooling in his stomach, Mark's vision spun. Clara's voice was clearer now, resonating deep within the light, calling for him, pulling him closer. "Mark." It was a plea, raw and filled with an aching anticipation. Which path would he choose? He could feel himself teetering between the shadows and Clara, the risk trembling at his fingertips. Then the whispers changed a frantic sound as fingers brushed past his shoulders, icy, ghost-like. Mark turned quickly. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice cracking under the strain. Something moved in the corner of his vision, flickering like a candle caught in the wind. But before he could grasp what it was, he heard Clara scream his name, echoing louder than before, mingling with the shadows. "Mark! Help me!" That voice sent chills racing through him, a clarity snapping him back to his purpose. He couldn't stay frozen in fear. "Clara! I'm coming!" He shouted once more, steeling himself as he ran forward, the shadows reaching for him, relenting as he surged into the light with determination. But would it lead him to her or lead him deeper into a terrifying truth he wasn't prepared to face? The light pulsed with urgency as Mark pushed through, heart pounding like a wild drum in his chest. Every step sent vibrations through the floor, threatening to crack the very foundation of this cursed place. He could feel Clara just ahead, her spirit dancing just out of reach, taunting him with solace that never quite materialized. "Clara!" he cried again, breathless, but the echoes swallowed his voice, transforming it into a ghostly mimicry that mocked his desperate search. The slender figures twisted in the light, their forms shifting like smoke as they surrounded him. Their mouths stretched into grotesque smiles, revealing rows of jagged teeth. "Join us. Forever." The words slithered through the air, wrapping around Mark like chains that he recoiled, shaking his head, trying to dispel their sinister invitations. He wouldn't be one of them. He couldn't let despair twist his decision. Clara was out there. Her essence flickered like a candle in the wind, just beyond reach. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath him, sending shards of stone cascading around his feet. The light sputtered, dimming, shadows pressing dense against him, lurching like monstrous hands threatening to pull him back into the maw of darkness. Panic clawed at his throat, but he forced his way forward, pushing through the weight of the looming silhouettes, determined to reach the source of the voice that called him. And then, just as abruptly as it had fled, the light exploded back into brilliance, revealing a passageway ahead. It was narrow, the walls slick with moisture, a stark contrast to the remnants of flickering firelight behind him. Mark hesitated, the beckoning shadows threatening to tug him back, but Clara's joyful laugh broke through the confusion. Her laughter disarmingly beautiful yet fiercely desperate. And suddenly, all the mental barriers shattered, instinct fanned a flame in his chest. "Clara!" he shouted, lunging toward the passage, racing against time. The darkness hissed, furious at his defiance, and it all came crashing back, the wailing, the pain, the feelings of abandonment. Somewhere, deep within, a voice warned him that the light was false hope, a veneer that hid the true terror. Mark charged ahead, the corridor tight, stifling. With every step, something cold snaked around his ankles, like the fingers of the damned dragging him down. Shadows latched onto his legs, whispering secrets of despair, promises of release if he would only let go. The moment of blurred reality shattered when he rounded a corner. Before him stood a gate, rusted, ancient, and bearing the marks of despair. He grasped the cold iron bars, struggling to comprehend the sight. "Clara!" he screamed again, startled by the sheer terror lacing his voice. Through the bars, he saw her, her figure shimmering like a mirage. She was trapped, a ghostly image in a world that existed solely beyond his reach. Her eyes were wide, filled with desperation, and she reached out, fingers extended, beckoning him toward her. "Mark!" she gasped, face twisting with terror. "They're coming!" The air warped as the shadows began to spill from the walls, forming grotesque shapes that writhed and howled in glee, hungry for him, hungry for their next follower. "What do I do?" he shouted, heart racing. But even as the words escaped, he could sense that the darkness was closing in, inching its way toward him, leaving no escape. "Mark!" Clara's voice rose above the cacophony, fierce yet filled with a haunting gentleness. "You must choose. Choose." The desperation in her tone pierced through the chaos. Did he choose life or death? Freedom or captivity? The frantic whispers intensified, urging him to turn back, to join them, to lose himself forever. "Choose!" Clara screamed, the conviction reaching him through the veil of shadows that writhed at his feet, but how could he choose? Just as he was about to grasp the weight of his decision, the shadows surged. A horrible shriek erupted, drowning out Clara's desperate cries, blasting him back into the wall of cold reality. Mark stumbled, heart racing, as darkness threatened to swallow him whole. "Mark!" Clara's voice dwindled, then twisted into a haunting echo. What choice remained? The figures lunged forward, a torrent of despair and madness. He took a breath, ready to move, but the ground gave way beneath him, and he fell. Into what? He couldn't tell. All he knew was the darkness was no longer just around him, it was within him. What awaited him now? Mark drifted, lost in an abyss that felt endless. He could no longer tell where his fears ended and the shadows began. Panic clawed at his chest, breath coming in short, frantic bursts. "Clara!" He called into the void, his voice echoing against the silence, but all he got in response was the oppressive weight of despair. Then, suddenly, a flicker of light broke through the darkness, a beacon in the storm. It was distant yet pulsing with warmth. The shadows recoiled from it, hissing and twisting like agitated snakes. Mark grasped onto the light as a lifeline, pushing forward with all his strength. He could almost hear Clara's voice mingling with it, a melody of hope that urged him onward. "Clara!" he shouted again, every ounce of hope filling his voice. With determination rekindled, he sprinted toward the light. As he got closer, he felt the shadows battling against him, grasping at his ankles like desperate hands trying to pull him back into despair. Each step felt like a fight, a battle between light and dark. He could almost see Clara, shimmering in the distance. "Mark! Hurry!" Her voice rang out, stronger than before but laced with urgency. It was enough to fuel him, enough to push him through the oppressive shadows. He would not lose her, not like this. With every ounce of willpower, he tore through the darkness, feeling the warm glow wrap around him like an embrace. And then, in an explosion of brightness, he broke free, the cave opened up around him, and there she was. Clara stood at the edge of a vast chamber, bathed in radiant light. The grotesque figures, the latent menace of the shadows, shrank back as if in fear of the brightness. "Mark!" Clara cried, rushing toward him, her eyes filled with tears of relief. As they reached each other, they were enveloped in a joyous embrace, grounding themselves in the connection they thought they had nearly lost. Their warmth breathed life into each other amidst the cruel shadows that had tried to consume them, but they weren't out of danger yet. The ground trembled as anger erupted from the depths of the cave. From the shadows, Steve emerged, transformed and grotesque, a harbinger of the evil that lurked there. "They can't have you!" he shrieked, eyes wild with frenzy. "You belong to the dark now. Stay back!" Mark shouted, stepping protectively in front of Clara, anger and fear coursing through him. Together, they took a step back as the shadows surged forward, and in that moment, they remembered the bond they shared, a powerful force that could illuminate any darkness. "We choose each other!" Clara shouted, voice fierce, illuminating the bond between them. Together. Mark echoed, feeling the very walls of the cave shake. The light, born of their faith in one another, erupted into a blaze. Steve howled as the shadows wailed, the energy pulsing as it poured from them. The ancient cave quaked, responding to the confrontation. The forces twisted, colliding with the shadows in a breathtaking surge of brilliant energy. And then, everything exploded. A blinding light engulfed the chamber, wrapping around Mark and Clara, a cocoon that sheltered them from the horrors clawing at them. The shadows roared in agony, smothered beneath the weight of their bond until finally, they disintegrated into nothingness. As the light settled and the edges of their reality came back into view, Mark and Clara found themselves standing on solid ground, outside the cave, the entrance sealed behind them as if the darkness had never existed. They looked around, panting, awash in a sense of awe and fear, yet also relief. They were free. The oppressive weight had lifted, as if a tremendous weight had been removed from their souls. "We did it," Clara whispered, and a tear rolled down her cheek. Mark nodded, pulling her close. "Together, always together," he repeated quietly, feeling the bonds of love, trust, and determination echoing within his heart. As they walked away from the cave that had threatened to consume them, the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, a promise of new beginnings. They held on tightly to one another, vowing to never let distractions or shadows come between them again. And although echoes of the past may remain in their memories, they knew that together, they could conquer anything that lay ahead. Their story wouldn't end in darkness. It would blaze brightly, a testament to love and hope, shining against whatever shadows might threaten their future. Now, as the Johnsons stepped into the light of their lives, let us take a moment to reflect on what we've witnessed, and remember, don't let the shadows win. You need to subscribe now, so you don't miss more exclusive stories that will chill your spine and thrill your heart. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and support this channel that brings these tales to life. Flood the comments section with your reactions and wild theories about this ending. Your thoughts matter, and they might just unlock the next mystery. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who crave suspense and adventure. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting this community through these actions.